Thunder rolled over Atlanta like a drumline from a marching band. The sound deep enough to shake the stained glass windows of St. Mark's, an old red brick church tucked behind a row of crepe myrtles on Magnolia Street. At 3:03 a.m., the lights in the nave flickered once and steadied. The pews were empty. The city was asleep. And at the front of that silent church, under a cross washed in blue from a cracked window pane, a 24-year-old black woman in a rain-damp trench coat gripped the handles of a wheelchair that held the most powerful, most hated, most admired man in Georgia. Zuri, he rasped. The syllables broken, the breath thin, like paper rubbed to dust. We're here. You did it. His fingers, a map of old veins and liver spots, trembled over the red envelope in his lap. Now, listen to me. Open the blue door. Just you. Not them. Behind them, at the back of the church, the heavy oak doors shuddered under fists and shouted orders. Security guards shouted into radios. Sirens keened, far off, growing nearer. A man's voice, the iron, expensive voice that wins boardrooms and courtrooms, rose above it all. Miss Walker, step away from my father. Zuri looked down. The oxygen cannula curved like pale fishhooks under Lionel Kingsley's nose. 82 years old. Billionaire developer, kingmaker, a name that made mayors answer calls on the first ring. His chest rose and fell in hard, shallow pulls. Even in the wheelchair, thin in a wool blanket and a monogrammed blue shirt, he seemed too large to be contained by the metal and vinyl. His eyes were clear and scared. Blue door, Lionel whispered again. Left of the choir loft. You'll see the cross carved in it. Take the envelope. Follow the note inside. That's my last wish, Zuri. Not theirs. Not the board. Not my children. Mine. The church doors boomed again. A slice of night opened, wet and flashing with red and blue. Men in long coats surged inside. Lawyers, a private nurse, 2 hulking bodyguards with earpieces, and a judge in slippers under a raincoat. Lionel's son, Cassius Kingsley, entered last. His jaw looked carved from stone. His cufflinks flashed. His umbrella dripped rain like a metronome. Enough, Cassius called down the aisle. You had your little ride. It's over. You signed the medical directive, Father. No more stunts. No more theatrics. We're going back to Northside. Zuri's hand tightened on the wheelchair. She didn't move. Rain dripped from the end of her braid onto the polished floor. The pastor, an old man in a sweater vest, stood frozen beside the pulpit, unsure if he was witnessing a crime or a miracle. Zuri, Lionel said, voice ragged. Don't look at them. Look at me. She did. He smiled. It had shocked her the first time they met, that smile. Not because it was warm, but because it arrived like light under a locked door, faint and stubborn. It made you want to find the key. Open the blue door, he breathed. Then read the words out loud. And after that, take me where I ask. Promise. Zuri nodded, but it felt like stepping off a roof. She could feel the weight of cameras waiting outside. Feel the fire of the headlines writing themselves. Mistress kidnaps dying billionaire to church. She could hear her auntie's voice in her head. Baby, you don't play with old money. Old money will play you. She leaned close so he could hear her over the echoing footsteps and echoing threats. I promise. Cassius reached the front pew. He didn't look at Zuri. He looked through her, as if the space she occupied could be rented out for an event. Father, he said, enough. Lionel Kingsley lifted one shaking hand and touched Zuri's wrist, a gentle, private touch that felt like a signature. Go, he whispered. Zuri released the wheelchair and crossed to the left side of the sanctuary. Her steps were quick, soundless. On the paneled wall, tucked in shadow beside the choir loft, a narrow door waited. Faded blue, the paint cracked like a dry riverbed. A small wooden cross carved at eye level. She reached for the iron latch. Her hand shook that eye in the middle of the aisle. Cassius's voice sharpened. Miss Walker, If you open that door, Zuri lifted the latch, the blue door side inward. The smell of old wood and hymnals came out to meet her. Inside, a closet no larger than a walk-in pantry held a stack of folded choir robes, a tin of wax for the candle holders, a rusted fan, and, on the floor, an old steel cash box with a brass latch. A faded strip of masking tape on its lid, Kingsley. She knelt, fingers slipping under the latch. It popped up with a soft click that felt, somehow, like a gun being cocked. Inside, there was only a red spiral notebook and a narrow manila envelope tied with twine. The same red as the envelope in Lionel's lap. She lifted the notebook and, beneath it, caught the glint of a tiny brass key taped to the cardboard bottom. Zuri. Lionel's voice, loud, sudden, full. He had pushed himself half out of the wheelchair, as if trying to stand. Read it. Read it now. She slid the manila envelope free and untied the twine. A single sheet of paper lay inside, creased at the corners, the writing small and neat. She swallowed, throat dry, and stepped back into the sanctuary's blue light. I, Lionel Grant Kingsley, she read, her voice carrying into the rafters. Of sound mind and failing body, declare this my last wish. The church doors boomed again. Rain gusted, bringing with it the smell of wet asphalt and police oil. Cassius lowered his umbrella and stared up at his father with a face that had learned to win without showing hunger. Don't, he said to Zuri. Not a shout, just a thin blade. Zuri's eyes met Lionel's. He nodded. To be carried, before dawn, to the place I began, she continued, and to return what I took. A hiss of whispering crawled the edges of the pews where the entourage had fanned out. Return what I took. Return what I took. The words echoed because no one could imagine what the richest man in the city could have taken that he couldn't buy twice to make the guilt quiet. And to make this return public, Zuri read, her hands steadying, so that no lawyer can bury it and no board can bleach it. I appoint Zuri Walker to carry out this wish. She knows where the blue doors are. For the first time, Cassius looked directly at her. Really looked, with a flare of alarm he couldn't hide. What blue doors? He demanded, but the question wasn't for her. He'd grown up in mansions, private schools, lakeside summers. He knew the smell of new wood and new money. He did not know the smell of wax polish and old choirs and blue-painted closets in churches where his father's name was spoken under breath. Zuri lowered the paper. The rain rattled the old panes like coins in a jar. Lionel's breathing was louder now, like something heavy being dragged across tile. She remembered the first time she saw him. It had been a year and 4 months earlier. At the Crescent Room on Auburn Avenue, a jazz club with a bar curved like a saxophone and a neon sign that blinked whenever the train passed. On Tuesday nights, when the open mic stretched between courage and pity, Zuri took orders and refilled waters, and, when the band needed a break, sang one song. Just one. She sang it soft, and it was enough to make people stop chewing their ice. He sat in the back, alone, with a black and gold cane propped against his table. He didn't drink. He listened with his head tipped, as if the sound had been placed a little above normal reach. He left a tip under the receipt, so impossible that she had to ask the bartender if it was a joke. Go thank him, Nana Tinu had told her the next morning. After Zuri brought the white envelope back to her aunt's apartment and laid it on the plastic-covered table. Careful not to disturb the Bible, the rosary, or the hairpins in their little dish. But go in daylight. And don't go alone. And go with your yes and your no ready. Ready for what? For a rich man, her aunt had said. They love to help you with one hand and take with the other. Smile, but measure it. At the Kingsley building, the lobby was marble and orchids and whispers. The elevator rose so fast her stomach tried to stay behind. When the doors opened, the man from the club stood waiting with the same cane. The same careful smile. You sang, he said, like he was reminding her who she was, just in case she'd put it down somewhere. I did, she said. Good. Singers tell the truth better than bankers. He ushered her into a corner office so high the city looked like a picture. I'm Lionel. Thank you for a song that made me remember something I've been trying to forget. They spoke. He asked questions that were both simple and heavy. Who loves you? What do you want? What costs the most in your life? He didn't offer school money. He didn't ask for her number. He asked if she knew what a land deed looked like. He asked if she had ever been told no because someone richer had already said yes for her. He came back to the club that Friday and the Friday after. He never touched her. He listened. He told her stories that were short and sharp. The grocery his mother cleaned where the owner wouldn't let her cash a check because her hands were wet. The first building he bought because a banker laughed at him. The first and last time he cried in public, at a funeral where the dead woman's name wasn't written on the program because the family had agreed to forget her. The city called her his mistress before there was anything to call. Bloggers slid her face into headlines like bait. The girl with the billionaire. Her apartment door got new locks. Her phone got new numbers. Strangers on the internet told her who she was. But in the quiet places, he was careful with her time. He made her tea with honey. He asked if she had eaten. When he fell in November, slipped, he said, on an old rug. Pushed, said the rumor. Zuri visited him in the hospital and read psalms while machines made winter noises. He put his hand over hers, twice, no more. When he returned home, thinner, cameras waited on the curb. She saw the stories bloom in the comments like mold, gold digger, homewrecker, witch. She closed the app, went to work, called her aunt, and told herself that having every stranger in the world decide who you are is like being caught in rain. You still have to go where you were going. And then tonight, a phone call that broke at the edges. Zuri, it's time. I'm at Northside. Come alone. Bring nothing but your courage. She had stood at her tiny sink, watching the faucet drip, while the words tangled in her chest. Time for what? He wouldn't say. He said the word church like a password. He said magnolia like a memory. She came. She told the nurse at the desk that Mr. Kingsley needed air, and the nurse, tired, kind, nodded like she'd been waiting for someone to be brave. Zuri wheeled them out under a sky that smelled like wet pennies. The driver's seat of the car didn't feel like it belonged to someone like her, but her hands knew it anyway. The city slid by, dark windows reflecting the wail of ambulance lights, raindrops like quick coins thrown back at the windshield. He guided her with road names older than the buildings, left then right, through neighborhoods that had been stripped and rebuilt until their bones forgot their first names. Now, in the old church where his mama had once scrubbed altar rails with lemon oil, where the choir loft's boards still remembered her footsteps. She held his last wish on paper and felt her stomach drop like the elevator that first day. Return what I took. What did you take? She asked, not reading, asking, because the words sounded too big and too simple at once. Lionel's eyes shone. Not money, he said. Land. Names. A promise. Behind them, Cassius gestured, and one of the lawyers stepped forward with a folded sheet. Emergency guardianship, he announced, voice booming, as if the church were a courtroom and a pews a jury. Signed by Judge Rollins at 2:17 a.m. Miss Walker, you have no standing here. Step away. The pastor took a half step forward. This is a house of God, not a house of God, Cassius said smoothly. Obeys the law, Pastor Jones. Zuri's heart thudded in her throat. Standing here, she felt two worlds press against her. The wet night full of police radios and court orders, and the dry, warm world behind the blue door where someone had hidden a notebook and a key with a strip of tape and a name. Zuri, Lionel croaked. In the notebook, page 7. Read the list. It tells you where the blue doors are. Take me to them. Before dawn. She flipped the red spiral open. Page 1. A single sentence. If you are reading this, it means I remembered what I promised to forget. Page 2. Nothing. Page 3. A hand-drawn map of streets that had been renamed, crossed, and corrected. Page 4. A list of churches, all with blue doors. Page 5. A line written twice, the second time darker. Take me home, not where they bought me a view. Page 6. The outline of a keyhole with measurements in a shaky hand. Page 7. Finally, a list of addresses. St. Luke's on Decatur. Ebenezer Annex. First Mission on Auburn. St. Mark's on Magnolia, here. Beside each, a two-word note. Ms. Rosa, choir closet, January deed. And beside St. Mark's, a small star and one word written harder than the others. Start. Her mouth went dry. This wasn't one blue door. It was a path, a pilgrimage, a way to return something piece by piece before the light changed. The notebook shook in her hands. Father, Cassius said, voice softening, performing concern for the pastor like an apology he hadn't meant to give. This is cruel. She's using you. Lionel's eyes flared. I used a lot of people, he said, every word lifting like a weight. And I'm trying to give one of them back. The room changed on that sentence. It tilted. Even the bodyguards looked at one another, uneasy. People who guarded men like Lionel knew how to read weather. Something was building that wasn't money and wasn't law. Cassius looked at the red envelope in his father's lap, then at the one in Zuri's hand. What's in the envelope? He asked. Lionel coughed, and a thin ribbon of red touched his lip. Zuri reached for a tissue, but he shook his head. He lifted the red envelope with the slowness of a man carrying a sleeping child. A confession, he said, and a map to the safe that holds the deeds. And a video. Turn that envelope over, Miss Walker, the judge in the raincoat said, voice tired, as if he already regretted being awake. If Mr. Kingsley wants to make a public statement, the court will determine the proper venue. Zuri didn't move. Zuri, Lionel said. And the way he said her name pinned her to now. Pinned her to the choice waiting in the space between his chest and theirs. If they take me, they'll take the wish. Blue doors will paint over blue doors. I can't climb stairs, but I can confess. Help me. Take me where I began. His eyes gentled. And if you're scared, be scared while you go. She slid the red envelope into the inner pocket of her coat. Miss Walker, Cassius said, each syllable clipped. That is my father's property. If you leave with it, property, Lionel snarled, sudden and bright, startling as glass breaking. That's your word for everything. Even me. Even her. The sanctuary held its breath. Rain traced hard lines down the windows. Outside, a police cruiser door slammed. 3 more men entered, wet and impatient. The night was shrinking. Dawn was a rumor. The space to choose was closing like a mouth. Zuri glanced once at the pastor. He gave the smallest nod. Not a license. Not a command. A blessing and a risk. Pastor, Cassius snapped. If you aid this, Lionel reached for Zuri's wrist again and missed. His hand fell, and the movement tugged the cannula. The monitor clipped to his belt gave a nervous beep. He closed his eyes and opened them again, fighting for focus. When he spoke, his voice was not a billionaire's voice. It was a son's voice and a sinner's voice and a tired man's plea. I made myself new and forgot the names of the old thing, he said. Help me remember out loud. He leaned forward, breath whistling, and whispered something only Zuri could hear. For words, a time, and a color. Locker 12. Magnolia. Red key. She slid her fingers under the masking tape in the steel box and lifted the tiny brass key free. Brass, but the paint flaking red. Miss Walker, the judge said, step away. Zuri's heart beat so hard she could feel it in her gums. She wiped Lionel's lip. She put the notebook in her bag. She squared her shoulders like her aunt taught her. The gentle square that says you're coming through even if the floor disagrees. And then the sanctuary blew open into chaos that a bodyguard launched. The pastor shouted. The judge lifted his hands, palms out. Cassius reached for the wheelchair and Lionel's hands, small and stubborn, clamped on the armrests like a child refusing to be pulled from a swing. Somewhere a radio crackled, Proceed, proceed. And the monitors on Lionel's belt screamed a high, gray note that made the hair on Zuri's arms rise. Zuri, Lionel gasped. Now. She moved, past the pulpit, around the front pew, back to the side aisle. She didn't run. Running is what guilty people do, and she wasn't guilty. She was chosen. She cut behind the choir's stand toward the side exit, Rain holding its breath on the other side of the door. The nearest bodyguard pivoted, hand outstretched, and then Lionel's breath hitched and didn't come back. His mouth opened. His eyes widened. The blue in the stained glass slid over his face like water. The monitor's scream stretched thin and thinner until it was only a line of noise that made the air taste like metal. Zuri froze. Her feet forgot what floor was. The pastor moved without thinking, nimble and old, hands already reaching. The nurse checked the line, the cannula, the pulse. Cassius's face, for the first time, lost its shape. "Father, Miss Walker." The judge's voice was lower now, almost gentle. "Put down the envelope. Let the professionals." Lionel's hand spasmed once on the blanket, and then, miracle or memory, found Zuri's. His fingers fit around her thumb with the stubborn grip of a child who knows the street is dangerous and the light is changing. His lips shaped a word that might have been please or might have been go. She couldn't tell. She wanted to lean closer and spend the rest of her life understanding that one word. The church held still. Outside, the first thin gray of morning touched the edge of the stained glass, pearling the cross and the cracked blue pane. Somewhere far away, a train blew a low, lonely horn. "Zuri," Lionel breathed. A sound no one should have heard, and everyone did. "Finish it." His hand went slack. The monitor went from scream to silence. Cassius reached for the wheelchair. Zuri clutched the red envelope. The notebook heavy in her bag, the tiny red-painted key warm against her palm, and turned toward the side door, where rain and sirens and a street with a name like a memory waited. She could save his last wish, or she could surrender to the law that had learned his shape. She put her hand on the exit bar. The door cracked. Rain rushed in like an answer, and from the vestibule beyond, a shadow rose up where no one should have been, broad-shouldered, hooded, holding an object that flashed dull under the church's blue light. And the shadow said, calm as a cruel prayer, "Give me the envelope, Miss Walker, and nobody gets hurt." The hooded man's voice was steady, like someone who had practiced being calm when other people shook. Rain hissed through the crack in the door and drummed on the stone steps outside. Zuri did not step back. She tightened her grip on the red envelope and took in what mattered. Boots wet to the ankle, a dark sweatshirt, hands clean, an old scar cutting across the first knuckle of his left hand. The object in his right fist was not a gun. It was a crowbar, short and ugly. Cassius spoke first, sharp with relief and fury. "Officer." The hood turned. The man was not a police officer. He pushed the door wider with his shoulder and stepped inside far enough for everyone to hear him. His face stayed in shadow. "Envelope," he repeated low. "Now, sir," the pastor said, voice even, "you're in a church." "I'm in a city that forgot how to tell the truth," the man said. "And you're all in my way." The bodyguards moved in a practiced arc. The one on the left reached toward his belt. The hooded man swung the crowbar once, hard and fast, not to hit anyone, but to make space. The metal sang against the brass doorplate and sparked. Everyone flinched. Zuri heard Lionel's last breath still living in the silence. Then she heard her aunt's voice again, the old lesson for hard nights. When a storm comes, tuck your fear inside your ribs and move your feet. She slipped sideways, pivoted behind the baptismal font, and slid into the narrow passage that led past the choir robes toward the storage room. The hood snapped toward her movement. "Hey!" The bodyguards lunged, but whether they lunged at her or at him didn't matter. The aisle became a tangle of suits, elbows, and thunder. The judge shouted something about the law. The pastor shouted something about peace. The hood cut through it all like a blade, reaching for Zuri. She ducked into the blue door closet, grabbed the steel cash box with both hands, and hurled it low. It skidded into his shins with a heavy thud. He stumbled, swore, and the crowbar clanged against the stone. Zuri shot past him, burst through the side exit into rain that felt like a curtain of needles, and ran. She didn't run like a panicked person. She ran like somebody with a map inside her body. Down the ramp, across the small, cracked lot, left onto Magnolia where the street lamps blinked and hummed. Her braid slapped her back. Her trench coat flapped like a tired flag. In her pocket, the red key ticked against her phone, tiny and hot. Behind her, the church erupted. Voices, footsteps, tires throwing water, a siren turning. Someone shouted her name like a curse and like a prayer. Zuri cut across a narrow yard where a plastic tricycle lay on its side, slid through a gate that had lost its latch, and came out on an alley that smelled like damp cardboard and fried chicken. A cat bolted. A motion light flickered and died. She kept moving. She had grown up dodging trouble that arrived with loud shoes. She knew which parts of a city were softer than they looked. Locker 12. Magnolia. Red key. What was Magnolia besides the street she was on? She scanned left and right as she ran. Magnolia wash and fold. Magnolia storage. Magnolia bus depot. An older building at the corner, windows fogged from breath and travel. The sign was sun-faded, the benches old, the vending machines newer than they wanted to be. A place for people in between places. She cut across the street and nearly slipped on the painted crosswalk. A car honked and slid. She hit the curb, shoved through the depot's glass door, and let it whisper shut behind her. Inside, the world changed. Rain became a faraway hiss. Fluorescent lights buzzed. A television in the corner showed a soccer match with the sound off. A woman asleep in a denim jacket snored softly, a tote bag clutched tight. The night clerk looked up once, measured Zuri with tired eyes, and went back to peeling the corner of a lottery ticket. Lockers? Zuri asked, throat ragged. The clerk jerked his chin toward a hallway. Back left. You need quarters. I have a key. She held up the tiny red-painted thing like a passport. The clerk blinked. Then you don't need quarters. The lockers lined one low wall, a patchwork of red and blue metal doors with numbers stenciled by a hand that had been paid by the hour and not 1 minute more. Zuri moved down the row, counting. 9, 10, 11, 12. She fit the key into the lock and turned. The tumbler resisted like an old man waking up and then gave with a sigh that felt like relief. She lifted the door. Inside sat a shoebox wrapped in brown paper and tied with red thread. No label, no name. She pulled it out and set it on the metal bench. Her fingers wanted to shake. She told them no. She peeled away the paper, lifted the lid, and stared that on top was a small black phone with a single button. Beneath it, a flash drive taped to an index card. Under that, a folded letter. Under that, 2 items that didn't belong together but did. A stack of yellowed photocopies of old land deeds, some stamped, some handwritten, and a silver necklace with a tiny cross. Cheap and bright. Zuri touched the cross. It was not expensive. It was the kind of cross sold at the counter of a corner store next to the battery packs and the gum. But someone had worn it hard and long. The chain had a place where the skin had loved it. She unfolded the letter. The paper had been folded, refolded, and folded again until the creases were almost tears. The handwriting had the steady carefulness of someone who had been judged on penmanship by a teacher with a ruler. Zuri, if you are reading this, I have either kept my word or left you a mess. Maybe both. You are brave enough for either. Start at St. Mark's because my mother began there. Go where the notebook tells you next. In each blue door closet, you'll find a small thing that points to a bigger thing. Bring those small things to the place on the map marked with an X. The X is not a boardroom. The X is a kitchen table where somebody prayed loud enough to shake the walls, you will hear that I am not in my right mind. At 92, my father died with his jaw set and his sins pressed flat under good linen. He didn't believe in last wishes. I do. A man who built towers should die in one, my son says. I say a man should die in the truth if he can find it. Here is the truth. I built part of my kingdom on land that was promised to people who couldn't afford lawyers. I got papers signed with grace and fear and bad information. I told myself it was progress. I told myself I'd build them something better. Then I forgot to do it. These are not all the deeds. They are keys to the room that holds them. When you get to the X, the keys will make sense. Cassius will tell you the law is on his side. The law usually is. That's why we need witnesses. Press the black phone's button only when you're ready to show the world. It will send a video I recorded tonight to 3 places where Cassius can't pull the plug. Return what I took. Return it out loud. Thank you for the song that made me remembered. Zuri sat very still. The words sank into her like stones dropped into a deep well. She could see Lionel hunched over a table with bright light and a low ceiling, writing this letter with his hands slow and stubborn. She could hear the nurse rolling her eyes at the idea of a midnight confession and handing him a pen anyway. The flash drive's index card had only a short set of numbers and a street name. It was not Magnolia. It was a street in Old Fourth Ward that had a new name now in the brochures but kept its old one in mouths. An address that used to belong to a grocery store before it belonged to a parking deck. A place where a kitchen table might still exist. Zuri put the necklace in her palm. Her own mother had worn a small silver cross like this. Her mother had also died without enough papers signed in the right places. Zuri put the cross in her coat pocket. It was not hers. She would bring it where it had to go. Outside. A car door slammed. Another. The depot's front door opened and brought in a gust of rain and voices that sounded like the kind that got paid to find things. She closed the shoebox, slid it back into the locker, and turned the key. She slipped the flash drive and phone into her inner pocket beside the red envelope. She looked in the mirror by the vending machines. She saw a tired young black woman with rain in her lashes and a thread of determination tying her mouth into a line. She could work with that. Asterisk she left by the back hall and out a service door into an alley that spit her into a small street lined with low warehouses and a barber shop with a painted sign. She paced her breathing. She needed a car. The hospital sedan was back at the church and hot with men who wanted to press her flat. A taxi eased past. She raised her hand. It did not stop. Another would. Atlanta always had cars for the brave and the foolish. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again, a mosquito that had smelled sugar. She took one look. Aunt Tinu. She answered and spoke before the worry could spill. I'm safe, she said. Child, her aunt said. Breathless. I just saw your face on the TV. And if a lie could catch fire, that lie would have burned down half the city. Did you? He's gone, Zuri said. The words put a weight on the night. And he asked me to finish something. I'm finishing it. Then you move like your mama when she had a mind to clean a whole building by herself. Where are you? I can't tell you yet. Good, her aunt said. Keep your yes and your no close. And if anyone with a coat that costs more than your rent tells you you're wrong, keep going. I will. Eat something. You forget when you're brave. Zuri smiled without meaning to. Yes, ma'am. When she hung up, she saw a figure waiting under the awning of the barber shop. He wore a long raincoat with a hood up, hands empty and open. Not big, not small. His posture said he was tired but not weak. You move fast, he said, and his voice, stripped of echo, was older than she first thought. Your mama would be proud. Zuri's heart pitched. Do I know you? He pushed the hood back. His face was a map of lines earned honest. Gray hair threaded his beard. His left eye had a milky cloud in it like a storm. The scar across his finger was visible now. He looked at her with a softness that didn't match the crowbar. She realized, in a slow way, that it had not been aimed at her. It had been aimed at everyone else. "Name's Isaiah," he said. "Folks call me Red. Not for my hair. For the key." He nodded toward her pocket. "Thought I might need to scare some suits to give you a head start." "You were at the church." He made a small sound that could have been yes, or could have been regret. "Your friend promised to do this with me. Then he got weak. Then he got brave. That's a lot to be in one night." "Friend," she repeated, tasting the word for Lionel. It fit, not in the way the internet meant, in the way the letter meant. Isaiah glanced down the street and back at her. "They'll sweep this block in 5 minutes. You can argue with me later. Car's around the corner. You want to finish his wish, or you want to fight outside with people who think last wishes are a kind of game?" Zuri measured him. She didn't have time to be perfect. She had time to choose. "Show me," she said. They slid into a dented Buick with a rosary hanging from the mirror and a back seat full of tools wrapped in towels. Isaiah drove like a man who had learned to take corners without telling the tires. He did not ask her to hand over the envelope. He did not ask her why Lionel had chosen a 24-year-old singer to carry a city's old sins. He drove and let the rain do the talking. Locker had what it was supposed to have. He asked, eyes on the mirrors. It had a phone, a flash drive, deeds, a letter, and a necklace. "The cross," he said softly. "Ms. Rose's. She used to sing so sweet that birds around the church would stop and listen like it was their job. She died in a rent-controlled apartment 1 block from the first Kingsley Tower. Never could afford the new market rate once they finished the pool and the fancy gym. That cross stayed with Pastor Jones after her funeral, waiting for a day like this. Pastor didn't look surprised tonight," Zuri said. "He's been surprised so many times. In that church, he learned to hold his face." Still, they passed a billboard with Lionel's smiling, face drawn 10 feet high. "Vote Kingsley Foundation for a Better Atlanta." Rain ran down like tears. Isaiah's jaw flexed. "He did a lot of good," Zuri said, as if she had to defend a man who no longer needed defending. "He did," Isaiah said. "And he did a lot of taking. The truth can hold both without sweating. The good doesn't erase the taking. The confession doesn't erase the good." They turned off the main road onto a narrower street where the houses sat close. Porches low, lights on in kitchens where people who worked night shifts stirred soup and nodded at the news. Zuri recognized one corner store from childhood trips with her mother to buy bread and milk on the cheap. She had never known the name of the street then. She had known where the cracks in the sidewalk could twist a child's ankle. "Where is the X?" she asked. Isaiah tapped the steering wheel once, thoughtful. "A kitchen table with 2 burn marks and a groove where a woman rolled out dough for 50 years. You'll know it when you see it. That is not a helpful address. It's better than GPS if you're looking for a promise someone made and forgot." They stopped in front of a small, square house with peeling white paint and a porch swing that moved a little in the wind. The porch light was on. The number on the mailbox matched the index card. A woman opened the door before they reached it, as if she had been listening for a set of footsteps all her life. She was in her 60s, hair wrapped, eyes bright and tired. "You took your time," she told Isaiah. "I had to make a mess," he said. She looked at Zuri then, and her gaze softened and sharpened at once. "You must be the girl who sings." "I am," Zuri said, and felt silly and right saying it. "Come in. The table's ready. The kettle's on. And the documents are where they always were, under the flower. Because God knows no man in this house ever looked under the flower." They followed her into a kitchen that felt like a song sung without instruments. Warm, plain, proud. On the table lay a metal cash tin, a stack of folders, and a sheet of paper with names written in an old hand. The woman pointed to the flour tin on the counter. "Lift it," Zuri did. Underneath, taped to the counter, was a small keyhole plate the exact shape and measurement drawn on page 6 of Lionel's notebook. Her breath stuttered. "Magnolia's blue door wasn't the only one," the woman said. They trusted the churches because the churches had closets. They trusted kitchens because kitchens hold secrets and feed people anyway. Zuri slid the red key into the tiny plate. It fit. Something clicked from inside the counter. A narrow panel popped free. Inside the secret space sat a larger flash drive, a list of combination codes, and a folded sheet of paper stamped with a notary seal. At the top, declaration of intent to return property. Isaiah whistled low. He did it, he said, with the awe of a man who had asked for a miracle and got paperwork instead, which in some cities is the only kind of miracle that sticks. Zuri put the smaller flash drive from her coat on the table beside the larger one. We press the phone, she said, thinking of Lionel's letter. We send a video. We go to the churches on this list, collect what's left. Then we take it all where it can't be buried. The phone will call thunder, Isaiah warned. Once you press it, you can't press unpress. I know. The woman, who had not given her name and apparently did not need to, poured 3 cups of tea. Drink, she said. Then do what you came to do. She looked at Zuri over the steam. You're young. The city will say you're dumb. I've seen young be smarter than old, and old be braver than young. Don't measure your courage by birthdays. Zuri drank. The tea was too sweet and exactly right. She set the cup down, pulled the black phone from her pocket, and pressed the single button. Nothing happened for a count of 1 and 2 and 3. On 4, the phone vibrated like a heart finding a rhythm. A tiny green light blinked once. Somewhere in the world, an upload began. Somewhere else, an email left a draft folder. Somewhere else, a public link woke up. She imagined Cassius standing in a living room full of art watching his father's face appear on every screen he did not control that Isaiah's own phone buzzed. He glanced at it and let a smile slip through. He's live, he said. Your friend is in a suit he can't pay to take back. He's confessing like a man who finally realized talking costs less than silence. Zuri's hands went cold. Good, she whispered. Then, we still have to gather the pieces. They worked. The woman handed over a ledger with names and dates that started before Zuri was born. Isaiah took a photograph of every page and clipped a copy to the notary stamped sheet. Zuri laid out the deeds on the table and pressed them flat so the corners would not curl. She touched the cross again and put it beside Ms. Rose's name. They were packing the documents into a zippered canvas bag when tires hissed to a stop outside. Headlights swept the window. Doors opened in a hurry. The woman's jaw tightened, but she did not look surprised. Back door, she said. And not because you're wrong. Because you can do more good out there than right here. Isaiah peered through the curtain. 2 cars. 1 police. 1 black sedan with a driver who looks like a yes. Cassius? Zuri asked. Or somebody who eats at the same restaurants. Isaiah cracked his knuckles like a man remembering his young bones. Before they could move, the front door opened without a knock. A tall woman in a gray coat stepped in, calm as Sunday. Rain beaded on her sleeves. She took in the room in one sweep. Table, faces, bag, kettle, and closed the door behind her with care. I'm not here to fight, she said. Her voice was too steady to be lying. I'm here to trade. Isaiah put himself between her and the table. No trades tonight. The woman slid a slim folder from her coat and set it on the corner of the table, just out of his reach. I work for Cassius Kingsley, she said. He asked me to recover stolen property. I'm not doing that. She nodded at the folder. This is a list of 4 parcels that were never properly transferred to Kingsley Holdings. If those deeds get returned to the original families, the legal fight will take years, and in those years a lot of people will move back into houses no one can push them out of. That might be better than a public brawl that ends with a judge freezing everything. Why are you helping us? Zuri asked. Simple. The woman breathed in like it hurt. Because my grandmother's name is on one of those parcels, she said, and her voice cracked on grandmother. And because I am tired of ironing men's lies. I can't fix the whole thing. I can point to the threads that pull loose faster. She slid the folder closer. Take it or don't. If you take it, go out the back and follow the alley to the funeral home. The driver of the black sedan is mine, and he owes me a favor. He'll give you 5 minutes before he remembers who pays him. That's the most I can buy you." Isaiah glanced at Zuri. He was the age of caution. She was the age of speed. They met in the middle. "Thank you," Zuri said. The woman's mouth softened. "Don't thank me until it works." She looked at the canvas bag. "You're about to change what a lot of people think is possible. That makes people generous and cruel. Be ready for both." They went out the back as the front room filled with the sound of polite voices becoming less polite. The alley shone with rain. The funeral home's awning glowed like a small moon. The driver leaned on the black sedan, smoked half a cigarette, and pretended not to see them until the last legal second. "Round the block?" he asked softly, already opening the back door. "Round many blocks," Isaiah said, sliding in. Zuri was halfway into the car when a quiet sound cut through the night. The small, polite cough of a gun with a silencer. She felt rather than heard the bullet bite the metal near her hip. The driver swore, jerked the car forward. Zuri dove inside and hit the floor. Isaiah yanked her up and shoved her down again as another soft cough kissed the trunk. The car fishtailed, corrected, and shot into the street. In the mirror, a figure stepped into the light of the funeral home. He wore a hood. His left hand flashed with a scar across the knuckle. He was not Isaiah. He was taller, shoulders heavier, anger in his posture like a coat that fit too well. He lifted the gun, aimed, and the third shot put a clean hole in the license plate where the county name used to be. "Who is that?" Zuri whispered, hard in her mouth that Isaiah's face was stone. "That," he said, "is the other person Lionel made a promise to. He didn't get a letter. He got a lie. And he thinks taking back the envelope will buy him the truth he was owed." The driver blew through a yellow light that had already decided to be red. Tires sang. The city blurred at Zuri's hip. Beneath her coat, the black phone buzzed once, then twice, then a third time. She pulled it out. On the screen, 3 words blinked in tiny white letters. "Video interrupted." Resending, before she could breathe. Her own phone. Ignored, angry with missed calls. Lit up with a new message from a number she didn't know. It was a single line. No name, no greeting. "If you want to honor his last wish, come alone to the place where he first lied." The location. Pinged below it like a dare. It was the Crescent Room. The jazz club where she had sung one song and a man had remembered what he meant to forget. Rain streaked down the windows of the black sedan, blurring Atlanta's streetlights into trembling halos of gold. Zuri stared at the message glowing on her phone. "If you want to honor his last wish, come alone to the place where he first lied." The Crescent Room. Her pulse thumped in her ears. The jazz club was where it had all begun, where Lionel Kingsley had first seen her, first spoken to her, first planted the seed of something bigger than money or romance. It was also, apparently, where his secrets had roots. Isaiah glanced at her phone, then back to the road. "You're not going alone." He said, "Come alone," she replied, clutching the red envelope tighter against her chest. "If I show up with anyone, they'll think I'm hiding behind someone else. Lionel trusted me to finish this, not hide from it." Isaiah sighed, the sound of an old man who'd buried too many friends. "Child, men like him build storms, and when they die, the thunder don't stop. You can't outbrave a bullet with good intentions." "I'm not trying to outbrave it," she said quietly. "I'm trying to finish it." The driver took a sharp left. The skyline opened up, glowing against the rain. Neon lights bled red and blue through the drizzle. Gas stations, pawn shops, a billboard of Lionel Kingsley's smiling face half torn by the wind. The words below it flickered. "A legacy of honor." Zuri almost laughed. They parked 2 blocks from the Crescent Room. The street was mostly empty except for a few drunks and a stray dog nosing through a pile of wet trash. The club's sign still flickered. "Crescent Room. Live music wed. Son." The lights inside were on. Someone was waiting. Isaiah pulled the car to a slow stop. "I'll be across the street. You go in, keep your back to a wall, and don't hand over that envelope unless you have to. You understand?" Zuri nodded. Her fingers brushed the red-painted key in her pocket, the small cross beside it, and the notebook pressed flat against her ribs. "If something happens, don't finish that sentence," Isaiah said softly. "Nothing's going to happen to you tonight. You got too much story left." Zuri stepped out into the rain. It had softened now, falling in slow, cold threads. Her shoes splashed through puddles as she crossed to the club's entrance. The door creaked open. Inside, the smell of stale smoke and lemon oil hit her like a memory. The place looked the same as that first night. Low ceiling, small stage, red velvet curtains, empty tables scattered like chess pieces left mid-game. A single bulb over the bar hummed. "Miss Walker." The voice came from the back booth. Smooth, deep, with a practiced patience that made her skin crawl. Cassius Kingsley stood up slowly, his tailored gray suit glinting faintly under the dim lights. His face was calm, too calm, but his eyes were tired, dark with sleepless anger. Behind him sat two men in black coats. Their hands rested on the table, still but ready. Zuri froze in the doorway. "You sent the message." Cassius gave a small nod. "I did." He gestured toward the seat opposite him. "Sit, please. You've been running all night. You must be tired." "I'm not tired," she said, walking forward but not sitting. "I'm curious." He smiled without warmth. "Then we have that in common." She stayed standing. The rain beat a slow rhythm against the windows. Cassius reached into his coat pocket and set a small black remote on the table. With a click, the projector on the ceiling buzzed to life. The screen above the stage flickered. Lionel's face appeared, pale and worn, recorded in what looked like the hospital room. "Return what I took," Lionel's voice said. "And let my last word be heard by the people I wronged, not the ones who profited from my silence." Cassius clicked the remote again, freezing the video. "That," he said calmly, "is what you released to the world tonight. You think you did something noble, don't you?" Zuri's heartbeat quickened. "He asked me to do it. And do you even know what you've done?" Cassius's voice sharpened. "You've set off a chain that'll destroy hundreds of employees, entire foundations, charities. Every building that bore his name will be tied to scandal. The Kingsley legacy was built on stolen land," she interrupted. He admitted it. Cassius's jaw clenched. "My father was many things, proud, brilliant, manipulative, but he was never a thief. That land was bought legally. If anyone forged papers, it wasn't him." Zuri stepped closer. "Then why did he leave me the notebook? The deeds? The letters?" Cassius's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, a tiny flinch in the eyes. "Because he wanted to punish me," he said. "And you're his perfect weapon. Young, naive, easy to believe you're saving the world while you burn it down." Zuri's hands curled into fists. He wanted to make peace with the truth. "You call that punishment?" Cassius leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You don't understand how power works, Miss Walker. You don't hand people confession and call it peace. You hand them blood. My father's dead. You could walk away tonight. Take whatever he left you, disappear, live quietly." Zuri met his gaze. "He didn't leave me money, Mr. Kingsley. He left me instructions." Cassius exhaled slowly, then reached into his coat again and set another object on the table, a small gun, silver and quiet. He didn't point it at her. He just let it sit there between them like punctuation. "Asterisk, then let me leave you one," he said. "Walk out that door. Leave the envelope. Forget the rest. I'll tell my people you were frightened, confused, manipulated. You'll live." Zuri looked at the gun, then at him. "And if I don't?" He smiled faintly. "Then you'll be remembered as the girl who killed a dying man's reputation." The door behind her creaked. Isaiah stood there, rain dripping from his coat, his old revolver hanging loose at his side. "The girl," he said evenly, "isn't alone anymore. Cassius didn't even look surprised. Of course not. You think I didn't know who she was with? The two men at the booth rose. Isaiah raised his gun slightly, not aiming, just reminding. You pull that trigger, son, and you'll prove your daddy right about everything. Cassius's calm cracked like glass. Don't talk to me about my father. The projector flickered. The paused frame jumped back to life, and Lionel's recorded voice filled the club again, calm but trembling. I lied once. I said I built alone. But I built on the backs of names that didn't get written down. If you're watching this, let their names rise. The screen went black. Silence fell heavy. Cassius's hands trembled just enough for Zuri to notice. The man who had ruled boardrooms couldn't rule this moment. He should have told me, Cassius whispered, more to himself than to her. He should have trusted his own blood. Zuri took a step closer. He trusted someone who would listen without arguing. The gun between them gleamed. Cassius looked at it, then at her. His shoulders sagged like a building losing its frame. You think you're helping him rest, he murmured. But you're just waking up every ghost he buried. Maybe it's time they woke up. The lights flickered. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed, closer this time. Cassius's jaw tightened. He knew the police were coming, and not for her. He stood, straightened his coat, and slid the gun back inside. Get out, Miss Walker. And if you're smart, you'll disappear before dawn. Zuri didn't move. What about you? He gave a thin, bitter smile. I'll be busy answering for sins I didn't commit, and some that I did. He turned to Isaiah. Take her out of my sight. Isaiah watched him for a long second, then nodded once. You may not be your daddy, he said softly, but you're close enough to know better. Cassius didn't reply. He just sank back into the booth, staring at the black screen. Zuri turned and followed Isaiah out into the rain. The street smelled of smoke and exhaust, and something new, change. Sirens grew louder in the distance. Somewhere in the city, the video was being replayed on every local channel, every phone, every feed. Lionel Kingsley's face filled screens that once carried his company's ads. They stopped under a streetlight. Zuri's hands shook as she looked at the red envelope again. There's something inside I haven't opened, she whispered. Something he said would matter most when everything else started burning. Isaiah nodded. Then open it. She tore the flap carefully. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, faded at the edges. It showed a small church on a dirt road, long before skyscrapers. In front stood a young woman holding a child, smiling shyly. On the back, in Lionel's handwriting, her name was Rosa. She was the first Kingsley. Zuri's eyes stung. He meant the first builder? Isaiah shook his head. No, he meant the first person who gave him land, child. The one whose name he erased to make room for his own. Zuri held the photo to her chest. Then that's where we go next, she said. Where? To where Rosa's house stood. The last blue door on his list. Isaiah looked at her, drenched, exhausted, trembling but steady, and nodded slowly. Then let's finish what he started. As they walked toward the car, the church bells downtown began to toll for morning. The rain had stopped, but the city was awake. If you were in Zuri's shoes, would you trust Lionel's last words or walk away? And where are you watching from tonight? Drop it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves real-life African stories, and subscribe for the next and final chapter. The truth behind the last blue door. The morning sun crawled weakly over Atlanta's skyline, painting glass towers gold and broken streets gray. The rain had stopped, but the city still glistened as though it had just survived something enormous. Zuri sat in the passenger seat of Isaiah's Buick, her eyes fixed on the photo, the young woman holding a child in front of a small church dot on the back. Lionel's handwriting haunted her. Her name was Rosa. She was the first Kingsley. What did he mean by that? She asked softly. Isaiah's hands rested steady on the wheel. It means the first brick of his empire didn't come from a banker, he said. It came from a woman who believed his promises. She gave him land, and he gave her silence. Zuri turned the photograph over. So Rosa was the start of everything? Isaiah nodded. The first plot. The first paper. The first lie. Zuri exhaled slowly. Then the last blue door must be where Rosa lived. He gave her a side glance. You sure you want to see that truth? Sometimes digging up what's buried doesn't bring peace. It just brings ghosts that remember their names. I promised him, she said, her voice quiet but iron steady. And I owe her. They followed the old map drawn in Lionel's notebook. It wound them through. Streets where skyscrapers faded into cracked. Sidewalks and where new condos. Pressed up against forgotten homes with peeling paint and gospel music leaking through the windows. Finally, they reached the end of Auburn Avenue, where a fenced lot sat between two renovated buildings. The grass was tall, dotted with wildflowers and old stone. A wooden sign leaned sideways, almost hidden. Rose's Chapel, established 1919. Zuri stepped out of the car, clutching the red envelope and the notebook. The air smelled of wet earth and magnolia blossoms. This place feels alive, she murmured. Isaiah came around to her side. That's because it is. Every brick that came from here is breathing in those fancy towers downtown. They walked through the rusted gate. The small chapel behind the grass was no bigger than a classroom. Weathered wood, blue door, tiny windows clouded with age. Its bell tower leaned slightly, as if the years had bent it in prayer. Zuri reached for the doorknob. The blue paint was chipped, but the cross carved into it was the same as the one at St. Mark's. Her pulse quickened. This is it, she whispered. Isaiah nodded. Go on. You've come this far. The door opened with a soft groan. Inside, the chapel smelled like dust and sunlight. Wooden pews faced a simple altar. Cobwebs framed the corners. But there, near the front, sat an old trunk, half hidden beneath a faded quilt embroidered with the initials R. Zuri knelt and touched the quilt. Rosa Kingsley, she breathed. He used her name for his. Isaiah's eyes narrowed. Not for. He took it. Zuri lifted the trunk lid. Inside was a collection of things that looked ordinary until you saw the years they carried. A family Bible. A bundle of letters tied with thread, a land deed folded soft from handling. And a ledger with names written carefully in fountain pen. The very top of the pile lay another red envelope. Smaller, thinner, untouched by dust. Her fingers shook as she picked it up. On the front, written in Lionel's trembling hand, were 6 words. For the one who forgives me. She swallowed hard and tore it open. Inside was a single page that Rosa's land built the first Kingsley Tower. She gave it freely, believing I'd build homes for her people. I built offices instead. I called it progress, but it was pride. Her family was pushed out, her church forgotten. I changed her name to mine because I couldn't bear to leave her behind. But I left her anyway. That if you're reading this, Zuri, you are standing where my sin began. You can end it. Return this land to her name. Let her chapel rise again. Let the people see that the Kingsley legacy is not marble and steel, it's this soil. Give them back the beginning, so they can have a future. And if the world asks why I gave everything to a 24-year-old woman with a song instead of my own blood, tell them this. She listened. And when the world stopped listening, she kept singing, Forgive me. Lionel Grant Kingsley. Zuri sat still, the letter trembling in her hands. Her throat tightened, and she blinked fast, but the tears came anyway, hot, uninvited, and honest. Isaiah rested a hand on her shoulder. He knew what he was doing when he chose you. She folded the letter gently and looked up at the dusty altar. We're not burying this secret again. By noon, the chapel steps were crowded. News vans lined the street. Reporters jostled for position as word spread that the mysterious blue door confession had led to a hidden church and an unclaimed property belonging to Lionel Kingsley's company. Cassius arrived in a black car, flanked by lawyers and cameras. His face was drawn tight with exhaustion. He stepped out slowly and stared at the small wooden building that had just unraveled his father's empire. "What is this place?" A reporter asked him. Cassius hesitated, then said quietly, "It's where my family began, and where we forgot who we were." Zuri stepped out from the chapel, holding the red envelope and the old land deed in her hand. The crowd turned. Microphones pointed. She didn't flinch. "This land," she said, her voice clear, "was given by Rosa Kingsley a century ago. It was taken in the name of progress. But progress without justice isn't progress at all." A hush fell over the street. Even the wind seemed to listen. She unfolded Lionel's last letter, held it up, and continued. He left his final wish in writing, to return everything this land gave him. Every tower, every profit, every name. And he asked me to make it public, not as revenge, but as repentance. Cassius's eyes met hers. For the first time, there was no anger, only surrender. He stepped forward and said to the cameras, "Then let it be done. My father's word stands." The crowd erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, people crying. Some cheered, some gasped. Isaiah stood at the chapel door, arms crossed, watching with the faint smile of a man who'd seen history circle back on itself. Zuri turned to him. "You think he found peace now?" Isaiah looked up at the sky. "Maybe not peace," he said softly, "but truth. And sometimes that's better." Weeks passed. The story shook Atlanta and rippled across the country. The Kingsley Foundation announced a restitution fund for families displaced by old redevelopment projects. Rose's Chapel was restored, not as a church, but as a community home and music school. The blue doors of every church on Lionel's list were repainted, bright, defiant, alive. Each bore a small plaque with the words, "Return what you took," and at the center of it all, Zuri kept singing. Her voice carried through the new chapel walls, over the crowd that gathered every Sunday evening to listen. When she finished her first song at the dedication ceremony, she looked to the front row where Cassius sat, silent but present. She nodded once. He nodded back. Forgiveness was still far away, but understanding had arrived. After the applause faded, she stepped to the microphone and said, "He asked for forgiveness. I think the only way to give it to him is to make sure we don't repeat him." The crowd murmured its agreement. She smiled faintly, eyes glistening, and added, "And for anyone watching this, wherever you are, don't forget, wealth means nothing if your name is built on someone else's silence." The audience rose to their feet, clapping not just for the song, but for the story that had finally ended where it began, under a blue door, with a truth too big to stay buried. What would you have done if you were Zuri? Walk away from the mess, or stand and finish his wish? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you love this story, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes in justice and redemption. See you in the next story.